Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was February 8th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Molt Cara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is one authored by Joan. It's in the commune category of register, which could be pronounced commune, I'm not sure. But this particular register is one where it's supposed to include rulings on cases, petitions maybe, where there's some kind of aggrieved party that has appealed to the king. So that's what all of the documents in this register are supposed to be. But then I think there's another category. It's actually phrased by the archivists at Pares as rulings on documents or topics that are on the behalf of interested parties. So it's not necessarily that there's some kind of civil lawsuit happening. For example, a couple episodes down the road, we're going to look at a document that Trenxodenia and bailiffs had transcribed about a minstrel, and basically it's in the same register as this, and the document is just providing safe passage for this minstrel as he travels from Barcelona to France. So that's not a civil lawsuit at all. So basically, when I'm looking at this document today, I don't have any framework to apply to it. Like, it's not like I can depend on trying to find two sides to an argument that then Joan is ruling in favor of one of the sides. It's not like I can count on that. So I will tell you that this particular document was just extremely challenging for me. This scribe has basically a way more difficult tendency to switch up the way that he writes the letter C and T, and then I think the R's in this one sometimes look like a C or a T, and then occasionally the E's don't look like the other E's. And then there's some abbreviations that I think are abbreviations, but I have not really encountered them in my recent memory. And I'm thinking in particular in line 5 after the word agebat. So agebat is 3 words into line 5, and then the word following that, I have just struggled with that word for many, many minutes. And overall, I've spent a lot of time with this document. I have done it justice in terms of putting in the time to try to make progress on it. And my only hope is that I can come back after a few more months and it will be a bit more accessible to me. I'm going to share with you what I do know about this document. This document is addressed to the curia et vicario of Lleida. So that is Lleida, that the town in medieval Catalan is Lleida, and in today's designation of modern Catalan, it's Lleida. So this town is a really interesting place. It's the location of the oldest university in the Crown of Aragon, the University of Lleida, or the University of Lleida, was founded in 1300. And alas, it didn't have continuous operation all the way until this day. I think in the 18th century, it discontinued operation after a decline of some decades. But it has been revived, and there is currently today a University of Lleida. In the Middle Ages, in the 14th century, this was a very prestigious university for the study of law and medicine. And so we're here in this university town, and the person who is the first subject mentioned in this letter is named Raimundo, and then there's a last name that's something like Spolico, or there might be an R at the end. It's really hard to make out the end of Raimundo's surname. And then we have a title, Baccalario in Decretum. And then we have what I think is Habitore Civitatem. So that is a phrase that indicates he's a current resident of the city of Lleida. He's got a law degree. And I really struggled with the paleography for Habitore because I didn't want to believe that the scribe was omitting the letter B and that the macron stood for a B. I think that's where I've landed now, but I just am so uncomfortable with that because it, in my mind, while it's not like super unheard of, I have encountered the macron being used for a B in other documents. It's just not common, and there's a lot of written out B's in other instances in this same document. So yeah, it could just be because saying that someone's residing in a city is a very common thing to note in the chancery documents, and so abbreviation is more likely for the more common phrases. But goodness gracious, I went back and forth with ChatGPT on this to quite an extent. This is one of my longest ChatGPT chats because I was just throwing everything at the wall when it came to some of the Latin words in this document and the paleography, trying to explore, well, could it be this word? Could it be that word? And I'm still not at the point, after several hours working with this one, I'm still not at the point where I can tell you what the problem was. I've got the place, I've got a few names, and that's kind of it. So I would sink more time into this if the paleography wasn't so difficult. If I could be sure of the letter forms, then I would have way more easy of a time trying to figure out the meaning. But there's so many words that I can't pin down. And when we're talking about Latin, one thing you have to keep in mind is that the ending of the word or some kind of form of the word that could be off by just one letter can dramatically alter the meaning of the entire phrase. So that's why I'm just going to pause on my understanding of this letter and or this document. It's probably more of a ruling than a letter. Let me tell you more about what I do know. There are 3 people mentioned in this letter. Raimundo, who I had mentioned earlier. Then further down on folio 27R is someone whose name includes Arnoldi. And then at the beginning line of folio 27V is someone named Bernardo. So that's what I got. But what I can do is zoom out a bit and learn more about the addressee of this letter. Curie et vicario of Lleida. So the curie was the small court, is a phrase that's used by a scholar that I've been reading about some of the structures here. Deborah Bukoyanis has written a really interesting book called Kings as Judges, looking in more detail at how in various places in the Middle Ages the king's justice was enacted or resisted. And chapter 8 is all about Catalonia. Most of the content of that chapter is about the political structures in the earlier part of the Crown of Aragon, so 13th century and early 14th century. But there's a lot that still applied. I consulted Thomas Bison's book about the history of the Crown of Aragon, and Bison mentions how a lot of these institutions were very long-lasting. So the curie, and then the vicario here is actually referred to by other scholars as the veguer. So the veguer was a representative of the nobility, although I'm seeing some moments where the king could override or the appointment of a particular veguer. So it's not clear to me that it's like an entity, the person in that office could go against the king necessarily, or be somebody that the regional noble would prefer over who the king prefers. So we have some kind of court of justice. The vicario or veguer is the authority figure. And I think that what's going on in this letter is that someone has appealed to the king, or maybe it's a situation where the topic at hand requires the king's authority over that of the more local authorities. But either way, Joan has entered into whatever dispute or situation this was. So that's, I think, all I got. I'm going to put onto the webpage for this this document a few quotes from different sources that I've consulted for my understanding of some of the judicial structures for the towns within the Crown of Aragon. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention here, actually, as I'm looking through my notes. Marie Kelleher's book, The Hungry City, was very helpful in explaining another type of official who we see coming up in a lot of the documents, the bailiff. So the bailiff was directly appointed by the king and had primary responsibilities over the financial aspects of governance, so taxes and any kind of financial dealings that involved bringing in the authority of the king. That would be handled by the bailiff. And then the veguer was in charge of the court system in that locality and ensuring justice, so police kinds of responsibilities, and then also the military muster. So that's a distinction between bailiff and veguer that I think is a good one to keep in mind. And remember, there's no bailiffs mentioned in this document here. Pretty sure. All right. Well, gosh. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Companiona. Yeah, if you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, like, what the heck is this document even about? Well, I guess I've done my job. Low bar, low bar. Remember, the motto of the Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document, and if you want to knock your head against the wall of some difficult paleography, this is one for you. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.